The fog that morning was thick enough to chew. It rolled in off the Thames like a living thing, swallowing the spires of London and muffling the city's heartbeat until even the gulls sounded half-drowned. Elias Crow stood on the Albert Embankment, coat collar turned up, watching the river slide past in greasy silence. He had come for the light. Photographers always chased light, but the light had vanished, and what remained was a gray so absolute it felt like the world had been erased and redrawn in pencil. He was 42, London-born but New York raised after his parents split, and he carried both cities in the way he walked, the clipped stride of Manhattan, the sideways glance of the underground. His camera, a battered Leica M10, hung from his neck like a talisman. He had shot wars, weddings, wildfires, and one particularly harrowing fashion week in Milan, but nothing had prepared him for the hush that settled over the river that morning. It was the kind of quiet that made you listen for footsteps that weren't there. Elias raised the camera. Through the viewfinder the fog became architecture, swirling buttresses, dissolving arches. He clicked the shutter. The sound cracked the silence like a bone. Somewhere behind him a pigeon took flight, wings clapping against the damp air. He lowered the camera and saw him. The old man stood 10 feet away, half obscured by the mist, as though the fog had coughed him up. Tall even now, though stooped, navy greatcoat hanging loose on a frame that had once been broad. Hair the color of iron filings cropped close to the skull, a face carved by decades of wind and regret. In his gloved hand he held a single white chess pawn, ivory yellowed with age. Elias felt the moment stretch, elastic and dangerous. He had photographed strangers before, Bedouin elders in the desert, monks in the Himalayas, but none had looked at him the way this old man did, as if he already knew the shape of Elias's cowardice. "Morning," Elias said, "because Englishmen say that even when the morning is trying to murder them." The old man tilted his head. Voice like gravel soaked in whiskey, faint Midlands burr. "You always photograph the dead?" "Only the ones still breathing." A sound escaped the old man, half laugh, half cough. He stepped closer. The pawn trembled between his fingers. Up close Elias saw the liver spots on his temples, the tremor in his left hand that wasn't age but memory. He smelled of coal smoke and wet wool. "I'm late," the old man said, but he didn't move. "For what?" "Checkmate." He pressed the pawn into Elias's palm. The base was carved with a tiny date, November 11, 1918. "Keep it. It's useless anyway." Then he walked away, swallowed by the fog before Elias could ask his name. The pawn was cold, edges worn smooth by decades of handling. When Elias looked down, he saw a word scratched into the ivory: "Forgive." He told himself it was a prank. London was full of eccentrics with too much history and not enough medication. But that night, in his flat above a shuttered kebab shop in Bethnal Green, the pawn refused to stay put. It rolled across the table of its own accord, always pointing north-northwest, toward a war Elias had never fought. 2 days later he saw the old man again. He was in Manhattan, chasing a commission for a glossy magazine that wanted the soul of the city in 10 frames or less. He had flown in on the red-eye, bleary and jet-lagged, and was walking Bleecker Street at dawn when he spotted the navy greatcoat. Same man, same posture, but now he stood beneath the awning of a closed jazz club, arguing with a younger version of himself, 30 maybe, clean-shaven, eyes burning with the kind of certainty that only survives one war. The younger man's hand rested on the old man's shoulder, pleading, not gentle. Elias lifted his camera out of habit. The shutter clicked once, twice. The younger man looked up. His eyes were the flat blue of a winter sky before snow. Elias lowered the camera. The old man was staring at him too, and this time there was no cough laugh. He mouthed a single word Elias couldn't read. Then the younger man pulled him into a black town car and they were gone. He developed the film that night in a rented darkroom in Soho. The negatives showed something he hadn't seen with his naked eye, the old man's lips forming Elias's name. Elias. Clear as day. He told himself it was coincidence. He told himself a lot of things. The third time was in neither city. He had taken the Eurostar to Paris for a gallery opening, his own work, a series called Vanishings, photographs of places that no longer existed. The opening was a disaster. The curator got drunk and tried to kiss him. The critics called his work sentimental tourism. and the champagne tasted like battery acid. He left early and walked until he found himself on the Pont Alexander III, the bridge glittering like a jewelry box under the street lamps. The old man was there, leaning against the railing, greatcoat unbuttoned despite the cold. The white pawn was gone. In its place he held a pocket watch, brass case dented, glass cracked. The hands were frozen at 11:11. "You're following me," Elias said. "Or you're following me." The old man raised the watch and showed Elias the face. "Look." The second hand twitched once, then began to move backward. Elias watched the numbers unwind, 11:10, 11:09, 11:08. When it reached 11 o'clock the bridge tilted. The ornate lampposts bent like reeds. The sky folded in on itself. He fell not far, just enough to bruise, and when he opened his eyes he was back in London, on the Albert Embankment, fog thicker than ever. The Leica was gone. In its place hung the pocket watch, chain cutting into his neck. The first tick was already inside. He pulled the watch free. The face showed 11:11 again, but now the date window read November 11th, 1918. He pressed it to his ear. Instead of ticking, it whispered a boy's voice, terrified, counting down from 10. He understood then that the cities weren't cities anymore. They were trenches in a war that never ended. And the old man was the only other soldier left. He spent the next week mapping the front lines. Paris opened from the back of a black cab in Soho, but the cab was a Mark IV tank and the driver wore a gas mask. Tokyo lived inside a lift in the Shard that only stopped at floor 1916. New Orleans breathed through a manhole cover in Harlem, but the manhole led to a dugout where rats the size of dogs gnawed on boots. Each place was a memory waiting to be relived, and each memory was a key to the next. He navigated them with the pocket watch, watching the hands spin backward into battles he hadn't fought, the Somme, Verdun, Gallipoli, Passchendaele. The old man was in every trench, always just out of reach. Sometimes he looked 90, sometimes 19, once a child with his father's medals pinned to a too large uniform. He never spoke in the memories, but the messages grew longer, scratched into mud with bayonets. February 12th, the pawn remembers what you forget. March 12th, they're coming over the top. 4 out of 12, don't trust the boy with the clean boots. He learned the boy's name was Tommy. He learned Tommy had enlisted at 17, lied about his age, died at 18 on the first day of the Somme. He learned that the old man, Sergeant Arthur Vale, had carried Tommy's body through no man's land under fire, promising the boy's mother he'd bring him home. He learned that Arthur had failed. Tommy's body was never found. The war ended. Arthur lived. The guilt did not. Elias was the echo. His camera, first the Leica, now the pocket watch, captured moments that couldn't be buried. Every tick backward was an exhumation. Tommy wanted him found. Arthur wanted him forgotten. The trenches were a battlefield Arthur had built to keep the promise he'd broken. There were 12 hours on the watch face. He had unwound 4. He found Arthur again in a version of Ypres where the cloth hall was intact and the sky rained poppies. The old man was digging, spade biting into Flanders clay, searching for something that wasn't there. "You're running out of time," Arthur said without turning. "I'm running out of mercy." "That's the same thing." He faced Elias. His eyes were older now, filmed with cataract and exhaustion. "Tommy's close. He'll offer you a deal. Don't take it." "What deal?" "Your piece for his. He'll say he can send you home, real time. He'll lie." Elias looked at the poppies. They bled where they fell. "What happens if I win the watch to 12? The war ends. Tommy rests. I face what I did. And me?" Arthur touched the spade's handle. His knuckles were scarred. "You get to choose which version of coward you live with." He wanted to ask what that meant, but the poppies caught fire and the trench collapsed into silence. Our May 12th, Arthur at 19, writing a letter home he never sent. The paper is Tommy's skin. He kept digging. Our June 12th, Tommy in a field hospital, leg gone, begging for his mother. Arthur holds his hand and lies. Hour 7/12, Arthur in a pub in 1946, drunk, telling strangers about a boy he couldn't save. They buy him pints and forget. He began to understand the rules. The trenches weren't random, they were regrets. His, Arthur's, Tommy's. The war fed on shame the way mustard gas fed on lungs. Every hour he unwound was a confession. He found Tommy in a version of the song where the wire was made of barbed photographs, millions of them, all showing Arthur at different ages. In one he is 90, alone in a care home, clutching the pawn. In another he is 19, carrying Tommy piggyback through the mud, both of them laughing. "You're persistent," Tommy said. His voice was soft, Lancashire vowels rounded by pain. He hadn't aged past 18. His uniform was clean, boots polished. Most people run after the first whistle. I'm not most people. No. You're the witness. Tommy gestured, and the barbed photographs straightened into a path. The battlefield became a village green, cricket whites, and lemonade. Walk with me. They walked. Children played, oblivious. A brass band rehearsed, Pack Up Your Troubles. Tommy bought 2 ice creams from a vendor who took payment in shell casings. Arthur's wrong, he said. Not in the way you think. He's not keeping me here. I'm keeping him. Every time he tries to die, I pull him back. I thought if I held on long enough, he'd forgive himself. But forgiveness isn't a place you reach. It's a trench you stop digging. Elias licked his ice cream. It tasted of cordite. Why tell me? Because I'm tired. Tommy looked suddenly, achingly young. I've been 18 for a century. I want to grow up. Or grow old. Either's fine. What happens if I stop? You go home. London, New York, whichever you prefer. The fog lifts. You wake up on the embankment with your Leica and a story no one believes. Arthur dies quietly. I fade. The trenches fill in and become fields again. And if I finish? Tommy smiled, and it was the saddest thing Elias had ever seen. Then we both lose. But we lose together. He left Elias with the ice cream and a choice. Our August 12th, Arthur in a church, 1968, lighting a candle for a boy whose name he can't say aloud. He found Arthur in the final trench. It wasn't the Somme or Ypres or anywhere history recorded. It was a street Elias had dreamed as a child, suburban, English, laburnum trees dripping gold. The houses were all the same, red brick and green doors, but the windows showed different wars. Arthur sat on the curb in front of a khaki door, wearing civvies for the first time, medals and a biscuit tin. This is it, he said. The last parapet. Elias sat beside him. The pocket watch was heavy in his hands. 4 hours left. I talked to Tommy. I know. He says you're holding on. I am. But not the way he thinks. Arthur opened the biscuit tin. Inside was the pawn, the letter, a lock of hair gone brittle with age. Death's not an end, Elias. It's a D-mob. I'd been AWOL since 1916. This time I get to choose the discharge. And me? You get to decide if you want to carry the can with me. He looked at the watch. The counter read 9 out of 12, but he hadn't wound back the 8th hour. The war was lying again. Arthur stood. There's something I need to show you. He led Elias through the khaki door. Inside was a dugout, sandbags, a Primus stove, the smell of wet wool and fear. On the table lay the Leica, lens cracked. I thought I lost this. You did. This is the moment you decided to become a photographer. Age 10. Your granddad gave you the camera for Christmas. He'd used it in Normandy. You took a picture of your dad crying in the garden. He never knew. Elias picked up the Leica. It was warm. Why show me this? Because every photograph is a wound. You open it and keep it open. Tommy taught me that. But you, Arthur touched the cracked lens. You let it scab. He took the pocket watch from Elias. Wounded forward 1 hour. The dugout dissolved. They were back on the curb. The laburnum was gone. Arthur's hair was white now, cut short. He looked like a man who had marched every mile he claimed. 3 left, he said. What happens at 12? We find out who we are when the guns stop. They walked. The suburban street gave way to a cemetery at twilight, headstones the color of bone. A lone piper played Flowers of the Forest. At the far end stood Tommy, uniform muddied, helmet under his arm. He held the white pawn. It's time, he called. Arthur took Elias's hand. His palm was calloused, a soldier's hand. Whatever happens, don't let go. They walked the rows. The headstones bore names Elias recognized, friends, lovers, strangers from his photographs. Halfway across, the piper stopped. When he began again, the tune was The Last Post. Tommy met them at an unmarked grave. Last chance, he said. Walk away. Both of you. Arthur stepped forward. Give it to me. Tommy hesitated. Then he placed the pawn in Arthur's hand. The ivory was warm. Arthur didn't flinch. He turned to Elias. Wind the watch. To what? Us. Elias raised the watch. Through the cracked glass he saw them as they were, Arthur trembling, Tommy weeping, himself caught between. He turned the crown. Our October 12th, the 3 of them in the trench, but the trench is the Albert embankment, fog rolling in. The pawn is in Arthur's hand, carving deepening. The cemetery vanished. They stood on the embankment, dawn breaking over the Thames. The fog was lifting. Big Ben chimed 11. Tommy looked smaller now, uniform too big. It's not enough, he said. You need 12. Arthur shook his head. We have what we need. He took the pawn, pressed it into Elias's free hand. The edges cut. Blood welled, mixing with Arthur's. 2 left, he whispered. 1 for you. 1 for me. Tommy reached for the watch. Not to take it, to help. Elias let him. Tommy's fingers were ice. Together they wound it forward. Our 11/12, Elias at 10, holding the Leica, eyes wide with wonder. Behind him, adult Elias stands in the doorway, watching himself. In the corner, Arthur and Tommy wave goodbye. The fog vanished. The sun rose, sudden and brutal. Tommy was solid again, older, the mud gone from his uniform. He took the watch from Elias's shaking hands. 1 more, he said. He aimed it at the sky. The crown turned. Our December 12th, a single white pawn, standing on a chessboard the size of the world, king fallen beside it. The watch stopped. Shattered on the pavement. The hours spilled out, fluttering like pigeons. Elias watched them rise, each one a battle ending. Arthur hugged Tommy. It was awkward, 2 ghosts learning how to hold. Tommy hugged back. Thank you, Arthur said. For what? For letting me bring you home. Tommy stepped back. The embankment dissolved, not into fog but into light. When it cleared, Elias stood alone. The Leica hung from his neck, lens intact. In his pocket was the pawn, smooth as forgiveness. He walked to the railing. The Thames flowed normally, traffic humming across Westminster Bridge. A veteran asked him to take their picture. He did, with his phone this time. The image was ordinary, Big Ben, red buses, a sky the color of Arthur's coat. That night he developed the roll from a camera that no longer existed. There were only 11 photographs. The 12th was blank, waiting. He pinned them to the wall of his flat. The pawn went on the mantel. It never moved again. Years later, when he was old and the cities had blurred into one long exposure, he would take the blank photograph to the embankment at dawn. He would hold it up to the light and see them there, always just out of frame, saluting. he never took the 12th shot. Some wars, he decided, were better left won. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps. Watch the full video for more details.